What's up? Welcome back, everybody. Today I'm gonna be talking about some stuff that I went over in the previous video on Pan, and I'm gonna be showing how it ties into the Garden of Eden. And we still gonna be talking about the rise of the patriarch, keeping in mind that all of the ancient cultures were matriarch cultures. As I stated in the previous video, in the Garden of Eden just means the entire earth. That's another reason why people who out there searching for a literal Garden of Eden will never find it, because they're on the Garden of Eden, okay? And we also must keep in mind that when we talk about Adam and Eve, during this time, there were many ancient people living on the earth during the creation of this Genesis story. There was never a time on a planet that literally existed as you read of in the book of Genesis, okay? And Adam being the first being in creation only symbolizes the atom, which is one of the first building blocks of creation. And I got into that in previous videos, and I'll get into it in the future. But understand that this whole story of Adam and Eve is a patriarch story. And one of the things that you will find in patriarch stories is that the woman is desecrated. So in the story of Adam and Eve, we know that Eve was responsible for all the sins of the world. Also, we know that the man was created first and that Eve was made from the man's rib. Now, we don't see that happening today. Every man I know have both of their ribs when they're born. And also we understand that everybody come from women. So understand that this is just a mythological story written by patriarchs. And again, in patriarch mythology, the woman is always desecrated. Just like in patriarch cosmology, the earth would symbolize the woman. And the earth is desecrated because, again, you see that the sun, again, is giving birth to the earth. And the sun is the masculine and the earth is the feminine. So you see in all patriarch sciences, the feminine aspect is under attack. But one thing about modern humans today is that we understand this, but we don't understand it on a cosmological level, of how the earth is the feminine and being attacked by the same patriarchs. So these same patriarchs that attack the woman through the Genesis story attack the earth through the cosmology. Now that we got all of that out the way, understand that when you read the Bible and it's saying that the Lord said this or the Lord did that, that these stories was written as a result of councils and different authors during a specific era. It didn't literally happen. There were gatherings where the Bible was compiled, okay? In fact, most of the New Testament was written before the Old Testament, okay? So understand that the Bible is not what you think it is. Therefore, you have to learn to use it as an investigative tool, which leads to another thing that a lot of people say, well, Brother Sanchez, you say the Bible is not true, then why you use it? I got to correct that before we move on. I don't say the Bible is not true. I say that it's not the word of God. It is the word of man. Now, within that word, we can find some truths. Just like I can find some truth in Jack and the Beanstalk, I can find some truth in the Three Little Bears. But we understand that it's all stories, okay? So to correct that, why do I use the Bible? It's the same reason why a detective would use the murder weapon that a murderer had. They wouldn't find a murder weapon and say, well, that's nasty, that's filthy, throw that away. You know why you want to use that? So you want to keep all of that which was given to you as the evidence and the weapon used against your enemy. That's the same thing we see in the law process today. They use the weapon of the enemy to convict the enemy. And that's what you have to learn to do with the Bible. So with that being said, understand that during the time of Adam and Eve, many ancient people existed. And that's another reason why later in the Bible, you ask the question, where did these people come from when Cain and Abel split? So understand that the planet was fully populated during this time. So this Lord that kicked Adam and Eve out of the garden, you must understand that Adam and Eve is symbolic to the ancient cultures that was invaded by that patriarch empire. That Roman Christian empire under Constantine and under the Nicene Council and plenty more emperors throughout history, even back in the Hellenism period, okay? This God that you're reading about in Genesis, you got to understand that the Bible was law during this time. So unlike law today, where we got a book of codes and public state codes, during this time, they didn't have all of that. The church was the main power during this time. So at this time, the Bible was the law. So if you want to get an example of that, just imagine today if our whole police system stopped enforcing the city codes and the state codes, and we used the Bible for our whole law system, and you was based upon everything based on the Bible. So that's what the whole Bible was back in the day. That's why they had to go around crusading and forcing it on people, because you have to force law on people. It's not real spirituality. The Bible was a book of law based on spirituality. The Bible was a book of law when you're dealing with the Old Testament especially. Understand that the New Testament did away with that law. So the law what was done away with in Genesis, this goes back to the video Pan that I did, because Adam and Eve is representative of those ancient cultures who was living on the land in the Garden of Eden. All of our ancestors was at peace across this planet, and a lot of them was vegetarians. As you can see in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve were vegetarians. Now Adam and Eve is Europeans. You won't find any European skulls that date back anywhere in history that doesn't have fang teeth. Adam and Eve you read about in Genesis were vegetarians, so only skulls we find of vegetarians throughout history without the fang teeth dates back in Africa to the ancient people of that land, which are our ancestors who gave birth to humanity. Now, like I said, Adam and Eve is representative of those ancient innocent people, those pure people who was at one with the land. They didn't wear a lot of clothes. So all of this stuff you see in the Adam and Eve story with them walking around naked, this is part of the story that you can take literally based upon those ancient people at the time who were kicked out of the garden. All of our ancestors were kicked out of their lands, okay? And they were sent to nations today where they were put in suits and ties and put to work, all right? So you got to understand that in our natural state, when you go all the way back to our ancestors, they didn't wear all of these clothes we got on today. They was just like when you go to these African people today that's in the villages and back in the bushes and all of that. They had on very little clothes, okay? Because they was more one with nature. They was more in tune with the land like the animals, you see? So they didn't wear a lot of clothes, all right? So the whole thing about Adam and Eve getting the knowledge of the devil and feeling embarrassed, you got to understand that that was when the word embarrassed came into being, because the whole thing about the word embarrassed is it simply mean embarrassed, okay? That's all that word mean, embarrassed. It mean embarrassed, to be exposed. So this energy can play out in a way where you can be embarrassed. You can get the same feeling as if you were in a meeting and someone snatched your pants down and exposed your bare ass. That feeling, you can get it without someone actually exposing your bare ass. So this energy of embarrassment can be acted out on different ways. So let's move on. They didn't have on any clothes or feeling embarrassed because they was naked. You got to understand that to be naked is to be exposed below the waist. Now this go back to Pan, because the root word of pants is Pan. Now when Adam and Eve put the pants on, that was the rise of the Greek god Pan. The concept of pants come from a group of people who was in pandemonium. Now this go back to the Pan video previously, because they only needed these pants because it was a lot of rape going on in their society. They had different evil energies of that nature, as opposed to the people that they invaded on these lands, which was our ancestors. So our ancestors didn't wear no pants, okay? They didn't need them because they didn't have an immature mindset. If you look at these African documentaries today, you see the people over there with, you know, with the breasts out, butt out and everything. Ain't nobody looking all immature and being corrupted about it. You know, they more mature about it than that, people. So we need all of these clothes because we live in an immature society. Even when they wear the little bitty shorts, the women getting raped over here, because we in a panarchy. You're going to get a lot of pan energy over here. So understand that our ancestors didn't wear pants, and that the whole thing about Adam and Eve feeling shame, our ancestors had colonized with these people, okay? Now this gonna get into videos I'm gonna do after this one, talking about the different dynasties of Kemet, because most RBG people are under false Kemetic cosmology and false Kemetic history under Hyksos information. We're gonna talk about the Hyksos in the future. So understand that during this time, the panarchy was rising on the planet. The patriarch was rising. Adam and Eve being kicked out of this garden and putting the clothes on, just like our ancestors was kicked out of their lands. They were given clothes to put on, and they were sent to the fields, put to work. And today we got our suits and ties on, our construction worker gear, and we put to work today. And nothing has changed, people. When we talk talk about that in the Garden of Eden, when they were kicked out, that represents the rise of the patriarch. The knowledge that was given from the tree of life is nothing evil. Okay, you've been taught that this is the reason why they were kicked out, but you got to understand that the patriarchs who wrote this story are lying to you. The reason they was kicked out is based on greed. The Greeks, okay, with the greed, keep that Gree in mind. These Greeks had greed. That was the whole foundation of their going around trying to take from people, getting stuff that wasn't theirs. Our ancestors were influenced by these invaders, people. They began to accept pagan gods and patriarchal gods that we still worship today, and we don't even realize how deep it is, because a lot of Kemetic people are sun worshippers, and that means you are a patriarch, and our ancestors were matriarchs, people. So when they put the pants on, that was the rise of the pan energy that we are under today. Now you understand this PA root that I've been telling y'all about from these patriarch people. Understand that when we talk about the Garden of Eden, that this was the rise of the panarchy. The God who kicked them out of the Garden of Eden is representative of that European power at the time, okay? Because all of the Roman soldiers and the European soldiers at that time referred to their higher ups as lords, okay? They were considered lords. So different lords and gods you read about in the Bible ain't the same deity as we've been taught. The Bible was a political book, a law book, and it was a book used for power and slavery. You must keep that in mind. So the woman being desecrated in Genesis being Eve, it's the same thing that these patriarchs gave us. They gave us this same story of the Garden of Eden desecrating the woman, and they gave us the same story in our cosmological science desecrating the woman, Mother Earth, with the sun dominating her. So they're saying that the sun gave birth to the mother in our cosmology, and they're saying that Adam gave birth to Eve in Genesis with his rib. Okay, so this is the ideology of patriarchs, people. It's the woman coming second, and I'm just showing you how it worked in the Garden of Eden and how it relates to the cosmology that many of you still accept today. So the same people who gave us that cosmology gave us this story, and you can't just accept one and keep the other. You have to give them back all of the lie. So I hope that break down a little bit of how the Garden of Eden worked. If you want me to do any more future videos on this, ask questions in the comment section, and I will do more videos and take this thing even deeper. Thanks everybody again for tuning in, and after this we're going to be going into exactly what happened in Kemet and what got most of our Kemetic people still under Kemetic patriarch today, because we're not tracing it all the way back. So stay tuned for these next videos about the second intermediate period in Kemet and what happened when they blended the patriarch gods with the matriarch gods. And a lot of Kemetic people are talking about Geb was the earth god during ancient Kemet, but that was not ancient Kemet. Kemet had already been civilized by the patriarchs and had a patriarchal cosmology. So when you go back to that state of Kemet for your cosmology, you're still under a patriarch. You have to go all the way back to the old kingdom of Kemet, and you will see the mother back in her proper place. Now, some of the old kingdom, I believe, had a patriarch during the ending parts. But like I said, stay tuned. I got my notes and everything ready. We're going to get into that. That's very important for y'all to understand. So again, thanks for tuning in. Peace and much love.